Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator John Warner.
Thank you very much for that strong ovation. I don't deserve it, but I accept it with joy. I was told unequivocally I had 3 minutes. And a good senator takes 2 minutes to just clear his voice. So we're going to make it sharp. But I want to say a few words from the heart. First, I've known the Memorial Foundation since the beginning. And I'll remember a November afternoon. It was misty, it was cold, and we gathered out on the Pennsylvania Avenue, and there stood one of the most iconic sailors in the history of America, Arleigh Burke. And he drew back the canvas, and that magnificent statue was there. And since that time, it's been awarded, and I say with a deep humility, to many, many persons. Well deserved to those who are getting it tonight. And my job is to introduce Bill Middendorf. Now, the interesting thing is I could go over the biographical sketch, yet they're going to have a film with the same thing. So I decided, given that I've expended a minute and a half, to do something that's a little unusual. And that is throw back to Bill his very own words. Bill had the guts, which I lack. I repeat, lack, to write his memoirs. There's too much out there about me that I never want to see in print. But anyway, here it is right here. It's called Potomac Fever. Now, the year was 72. I had finished about 2.5 years as Undersecretary of the Navy. John Chafee, a marvelous man, decided he wanted to run for the Senate, and he stepped down, and I fleeted up to become secretary. And Jerry Ford decided, and Nixon and others, that Bill Middendorf was the man. Bill came in to report to me. And he said, "I'm your new deputy." And I said, "Yes, we've met once or twice before. You'd been Republican chairman of the Finance Committee and so forth." And we had a cordial greeting. I said, "Now listen, you are 2 years older than I am, and I'm going to give you your orders, even though I'm a petty officer 3rd class in the Navy, and you are an ensign. And you're going to do as exactly I say, and we're going to make a team, and we're going to do this job." Because I tell you, those were serious times. We had the Soviet Union, Yankee submarines, 300 miles off the shore of Virginia Capes, all up and down the East Coast with a full load. We had a war in Vietnam, and tragic chapters of that war were unfolding before us every day with casualty reports coming in. So times were tough. And I said, our job is to do everything we can to care for the men and women of the armed forces, particularly the Navy and the Marine Corps, and to take care of their families back here at home, and particularly the women whose husbands are POWs. So we teamed up, and we were a darn good team together. I said, "I'm going to give you a nickname right now." And he looked at me. I said, "Yes, sir. What do you want, Mr. Secretary?" "I'm calling you Old Ironsides because you're 2 years older than I am. And those cannonballs from the press is yours. I'm taking the Congress to go up there every day and pickpocket every nickel I can for the Navy and the Marine Corps." That's the basic line between the two of us. He saluted and marched off and discharged his functions. Now let me tell you about Middendorf the man. It's in this book. The year goes back in the closing years of World War II. I was a 17-year-old, 18-year-old sailor in training ready to go to the Pacific, and he was now assigned to his first ship in the Pacific and on his way. And the war ended quite unexpectedly, and we know for what reasons, and I think the right reasons, it was ended. But nevertheless, Bill writes, he got aboard his first ship, he found it, and he became quickly moved up the ranks. And mind you, at that time, there was a tremendous transformation in the men and women of the armed forces. They'd fought a hard war. There weren't 90-day deployments or 6-month deployments. There were deployments of a year and a half. They were gone to the European theater or the Pacific theater. And when the war was over, it just, everybody couldn't believe it. And there we were, and it was a tough situation because many of these individuals said, I want to go home. I've done my job. Yet Bill inherited a crew that stood by him to bring his ship back from the Pacific to the United States. And here we go. He starts out with a typhoon. And oddly enough, when I went to Korea in 71 or 51, we got into a typhoon. So I've been in a typhoon, but I was a first lieutenant then in the Marines, and I stayed sick in the bunk the whole time. But this story talks about seasick Ensign Bill Middendorf getting that ship back home. However, we'd been at sea for some time. The tanks of our fuel were low. The storm deteriorated into a full typhoon. There was no moderate about it. It was everything at one time. As the waves hit the ship, we'd tip over to a frightening angle and shudder for a terrifying moment before slowly coming back again with those empty tanks. Every roll brought sounds of things crashing to the deck. Things should have been secured for heavy weather. Maybe they were, but anyway, they were rolling all over. But not against a rolling so great as gravity seemed to be working on our ship. The skipper, now listen to this, had literally locked himself in the cabin. I have been driving the ship, but as commanding officer, he was supposed to be on the bridge. No matter, he refused to come to the bridge. Can you believe that? Leaving one very seasick, very young, very inexperienced officer of the deck to do the best he could to bring this ship home. I had been struggling to keep the bow pointed into the violent seas, trying to minimize the roll, but a shallow, flat-bottomed hull does little to provide much directional stability. I then took to Navy calls bold action and ordered empty the tanks, flood them with seawater, and see if we can right the ship. I called the skipper in his cabin telephone, and he told me, damn it, don't do that. I order you not to do it. You'll contaminate the tanks. Middendorf said, I reflected on what, let me get the page here. It's hard to skip around and do this thing in 3 minutes. Anyway, he referred to Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, sent a strongly worded message to all commanding officers to remind them that when sailing into heavy weather, the skill and judgment of a professional seaman must always take precedence over the often arbitrary orders from higher authority. Quote, no rational captain will permit his ship to be lost fruitlessly through the blind obedience to plain order. Bill disobeyed the orders of the commanding officer, filled the tanks with seawater, and brought that ship home. Ladies and gentlemen, Ensign Bill Middendorf.